The crimson sun of Kithara Prime cast long shadows across the burning orbital defense platforms. As Admiral Vex Koroth stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Sovereign's Wrath, through the massive viewport, he watched the final moments of another rebellion crumble into cosmic dust. The planet below glowed with the amber fires of surrender, its cities broadcasting their capitulation on all frequencies. "Another world brought to heel," muttered Commander Zara Then, her cybernetic eye focusing on the tactical display. "The outer rim grows quieter each year," Koroth nodded, his weathered face reflecting the orange glow of dying ships. 5 centuries of imperial rule had taught him that resistance was merely a temporary inconvenience. The Galactic Empire stretched across 12,000 star systems, its iron grip unshakable. What could possibly threaten such dominance? "Sir," called Lieutenant Jex from the sensor station, his voice tinged with confusion. "I'm detecting an anomaly. Long-range sensors are picking up spatial distortions approximately 40,000 kilometers off our starboard bow." "Pirates?" Then asked, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. "Negative, Commander. The energy signature is unusual. It's not matching any known drive technology in our databases." Koroth's interest peaked. In his 40 years of service, anomalies had a way of becoming either profound discoveries or spectacular disasters. "Put it on screen." The main display flickered, showing the star field beyond their position. For a moment, nothing seemed amiss. Then space itself began to writhe, folding in on itself like fabric being twisted by invisible hands. Reality tore open with a sound that seemed to penetrate the hull itself, a deep, resonant groan that made the bridge crew wince. From the wound in space emerged something that shouldn't exist. A warship, black as the void between stars, slid through the collapsing wormhole with predatory grace. Its hull was scarred by countless battles, pockmarked with meteor impacts and beam burns. Yet it moved with deadly precision. The design was archaic, almost primitive compared to imperial vessels. But there was something about its angular geometry that spoke of lethal purpose. "By the Emperor's bones," whispered communications officer Ran, his pale Andromedan features going even whiter. "That's a Terran design." The bridge fell silent. Terran, human, a word that hadn't been spoken seriously in imperial circles for over a century. Humanity had vanished from the galactic stage after their catastrophic defeat in the Soul Wars of 2387. Most historians agreed they'd been wiped out, their homeworld either destroyed or abandoned to cosmic radiation. "Impossible," Koroth breathed, but his tactical mind was already analyzing the vessel's approach vector. "Humans have been extinct for, sir." Jex's voice cracked with sudden terror. "The vessel is powering weapons. Energy readings are off. The charts. I've never seen anything like this." The alien warship's hull began to glow with lines of brilliant blue energy, tracing patterns across its surface like veins of liquid lightning. Along its flanks, weapon ports opened like hungry mouths, revealing technology that defied imperial understanding. The very space around the ship seemed to bend and warp. "Red alert," Koroth barked. "All ships, combat formation Alpha 7, target that vessel." But even as the Imperial fleet began to respond, the mysterious ship transmitted on all frequencies. The voice that emerged from the speakers was human, unmistakably so, but cold as the vacuum of space. "Attention Imperial forces. You stand in the presence of the Terran Navy vessel Vengeance. You have forgotten us. That was your first mistake." The transmission cut to static, and in that moment of silence, Admiral Koroth realized that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy was about to change forever. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of the Vengeance, her weathered hands gripping the tactical console as she watched the Imperial fleet scramble into battle formation. Her deep brown eyes, hardened by decades of exile and loss, reflected the blue glow of her ship's charging weapons systems. Round her, the bridge hummed with barely contained energy, every surface alive with holographic displays and neural interfaces. "Mum," reported First Officer Marcus Chen, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment they'd all waited for. 47 Imperial vessels detected, 3 dreadnoughts, 12 heavy cruisers, and 32 destroyers. They're attempting to surround us. Elena smiled grimly. The Galactic Empire's arrogance was breathtaking. They'd grown fat and slow on 5 centuries of unopposed conquest, their tactics predictable, their technology stagnant. They had no idea what they were facing. Tactical analysis, Arya. She commanded. The ship's artificial intelligence materialized. As a shimmering hologram beside her, a perfect reconstruction of Elena's daughter, lost in the soul bombardment over a century ago. The AI's voice carried the same gentle cadence Maria had possessed in life, though her eyes now glowed with computational fire. Imperial formation pattern Omega-class standard, Mama, Arya reported, using the term that had become both endearment and knife twist. Predictable flanking maneuvers initiated. Their weapons are plasma-based. Maximum effective range 12,000 kilometers. Shields are traditional deflector arrays vulnerable to quantum displacement. Elena nodded. The Empire had grown complacent, relying on overwhelming numbers rather than innovation. They'd forgotten that necessity bred ingenuity, and humanity had spent a century in the depths of space with nothing but necessity to guide them. Meanwhile, aboard the Sovereign's Wrath, Admiral Korath watched his sensors struggle to make sense of the Terran vessel. The readings were impossible energy signatures that spiked beyond measurement, hull composition that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, and weapon systems that registered as both there and not there simultaneously. "Sir," Commander Then reported, her mechanical eye whirring as it processed data streams. "Our targeting computers can't get a lock. The vessel appears to exist in multiple dimensional phases, simultaneously. Then we fire everything at where it is now," Korath growled. He'd built his reputation on decisive action, not hesitation. All ships opened fire. The Imperial fleet erupted in coordinated fury. Hundreds of plasma beams lanced across space, turning the void into a light show of destruction. The energy barrage would have vaporized a small moon. Yet when the weapons fire reached the Vengeance, something extraordinary happened. The beams simply stopped. They struck an invisible barrier around the human vessel and were absorbed. Their energy converted into harmless light that danced across the ship's hull like aurora. The Vengeance emerged from the assault completely unscathed. "What in the void?" Korath began, but his words were cut off as the human ship responded. Elena had seen enough. "Arya, initiate Prometheus protocol. Let them remember why humanity once ruled the stars." "With pleasure, Mama." The Vengeance moved like a predator given form. Spacetime folded around its hull as exotic matter engines propelled it forward at impossible speeds. In seconds, it closed the distance to the Imperial formation, passing through their defensive perimeter as if it didn't exist. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. The human warship's weapons defied everything the Empire understood about physics. Quantum torpedoes phased through shields and armor before exploding inside enemy vessels. Gravitational lances crushed Imperial ships like tin cans, compressing their hulls into perfect spheres of twisted metal. Energy beams that seemed to cut through the very fabric of reality itself carved through the fleet, like a scythe through wheat dot in under 5 minutes. 37 Imperial vessels were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The survivors wounded and limping found their systems mysteriously intact but completely paralyzed. Their crews unharmed but helpless. The message was clear: we could have killed you all. We chose not to, this time. Dr. Kira Thorne materialized in the secure holographic briefing room deep within the Imperial Intelligence headquarters on Coruscant Prime, her form flickering slightly as the transmission stabilized across 12,000 light-years. As the Empire's foremost xenoarchaeologist, she'd been pulled from her research on the Vorthan artifacts to address what many were calling the crisis of the millennium. Around the circular table sat the Empire's most powerful figures: Grand Admiral Septimus Cray, his scarred face a map of 100 battles; Intelligence Director Lydia Voss, her augmented neural implants glowing softly beneath her pale skin; and Emperor's voice Darius Rex, the ruler's personal representative, whose word carried the weight of absolute authority. "Report, Dr. Thorne." Rex commanded, his synthetic vocal cords giving his voice an unsettling metallic quality. Kira activated her holographic display, showing the now famous sensor recordings of the Vengeance. Based on the ship's configuration and energy signatures, I can confirm this is indeed of human origin. Specifically, it matches the design parameters of the Terran Navy's Omega-class dreadnoughts from the late 24th century, ***. Impossible, Admiral Cray interjected, his cybernetic jaw clicking as he spoke. We have definitive records. Humanity was eliminated during Operation Burning Sky. Every world, every station, every ship was accounted for and destroyed. Voss leaned forward, her enhanced pupils dilating as she accessed archived data streams directly through her neural link. Our intelligence was absolute. The Sol system was sterilized with quantum fire. No life could have survived. And yet, Kira continued, highlighting specific sections of the ship's hull. Spectral analysis reveals battle damage consistent with quantum bombardment. This vessel survived the Sol Wars, Admiral, which means our intelligence was wrong, Rex finished, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. The question is, how many more survived? 3 sectors away, in the abandoned Kepler mining station that had become humanity's hidden capital, Elena Vasquez walked through corridors that hummed with purpose. The station had been gutted and rebuilt with technology that would seem like magic to the Empire walls that existed in folded space, allowing a structure the size of a city to exist within what appeared to be a modest asteroid. She entered the Strategic Command Center, where General Sarah Mitchell waited beside a holographic display, showing the locations of 17 hidden human fleets scattered across the galaxy's edge. Mitchell had aged well. Despite the century of exile, her silver hair pulled back severely, her green eyes still sharp as a laser cutter. Status report, Sarah, Elena said, studying the deployment patterns. Reaction is exactly as predicted, Mitchell replied, gesturing to intelligence feeds from across Imperial space. Panic in the high command, but they're treating it as an isolated incident. They still don't comprehend the scope of what they're facing. Elena nodded grimly. The Empire's greatest weakness had always been its inability to imagine anything beyond its own experience. They'd grown up in a galaxy where they were the apex predator, where no threat could possibly equal their might. How many know the truth? Elena asked. About our survival. Perhaps a dozen high-ranking officials. About our numbers? Mitchell smiled coldly. No one. The truth was staggering. When the Empire had launched Operation Burning Sky, they'd targeted every known human world and installation. But humanity had learned from the mistakes of older civilizations. They'd scattered seeds throughout the galaxy, hidden colonies, sleeper ships, research stations masked as dead asteroids. The Empire had destroyed Earth and a dozen major worlds, but they'd missed thousands of smaller settlements over the past century. Those scattered survivors had done more than merely survive. They'd thrived, unified by loss and driven by a single purpose to reclaim what was taken from them. Back in the Imperial briefing room, Dr. Thorne was explaining the implications of human survival when alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Director Voss's eyes went wide as data flooded through her neural connections. Multiple contacts, she announced, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. 7 additional vessels have just emerged from quantum tunnels in the Rigel sector. Configuration matches the first ship. 8 human warships, Admiral Cray said slowly, as if speaking the words might make them less real. Sir, Voss continued, her face paling further. Intelligence reports are flooding in from across the outer rim. Merchant vessels are reporting strange ships at the edge of sensor range. Ships that match the Terran configuration. Rex stood slowly, his mechanical movements precise, but somehow conveying the weight of dawning realization. How many ships are we talking about, Director? Voss was quiet for a long moment, processing data from hundreds of sources. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Preliminary estimates suggest thousands. Sir, possibly tens of thousands. The room fell silent as the true scope of their situation became clear. The Galactic Empire, master of 12,000 star systems, suddenly found itself facing an enemy they'd thought extinct, an enemy that had spent a century preparing for this moment. The parliamentary chamber on Nexus 7 had been humanity's first true victory in over a century. Elena stood at the podium where the sector governor had surrendered just hours before, her words being broadcast simultaneously to 17 human fleets and transmitted deep into Imperial space. Round her, the chamber's ornate walls bore the scars of brief but decisive combat scorch marks from plasma fire and the twisted remains of automated defense systems. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, her voice carrying the weight of 100 years of exile. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Federation Navy. For over a century, you have been told that humanity was extinct. That lie ends today in the Imperial capital. Emergency Session 7750. One of the High Command was in chaos. Grand Admiral Cray stood before a holographic display showing 17 star systems, now flying human flags, his tactical mind struggling to process the speed of the collapse. In 6 hours, he reported to the assembled leadership, we've lost contact with 47 systems across the Outer Rim, not destroyed, conquered. The human fleets are using some form of instantaneous communication that allows perfect coordination across impossible distances. Emperor's Voice Rex studied the tactical display with growing alarm. Red indicators showed human fleets emerging from quantum tunnels with surgical precision, striking Imperial installations and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. It wasn't random raiding, it was a coordinated campaign executed with mathematical precision. What are our casualties? He asked. Minimal, Director Voss replied. Her cybernetic implants processing real-time intelligence feeds. That's what's terrifying. They're not destroying our fleets, they're disabling them. Taking prisoners. It's as if they want us to know exactly how helpless we are. The truth was even more unsettling. Elena's daughter had lived on Nexus 7 when the Empire claimed it. She'd been 7 years old when Imperial forces arrived to bring order to the system. The records Elena had found in the governor's office showed what order had meant. Work camps, mass relocations, entire populations, vanishing into Imperial labor projects. That Marcus Chen approached her as she reviewed the files, his expression grim. Ma'am, we've established quantum links with all fleet commanders. Admiral Torres reports successful liberation of the Centauri sector. Admiral Park has secured the mining worlds of Kepler's belt. Resistance, Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Minimal. Their ships are powerful, but their tactics haven't evolved in centuries. It's like fighting children with adult weapons. Elena nodded, but took no satisfaction in the easy victories. This wasn't about conquest, it was about something far more fundamental. She activated her personal communicator, establishing a direct link to the Imperial High Command. On Coruscant Prime, the assembled leadership watched as Elena's image appeared in their secure chamber. She looked older than her century of exile, should have made her worn down by loss and hardened by purpose. I address the leaders of the Galactic Empire, she said simply. You believe you rule 12,000 star systems. You believe your power is absolute. You are wrong. Rex leaned forward, his mechanical voice carrying Imperial authority. You lead a handful of survivors playing at war, human. Surrender now, and your people will be granted mercy. Elena's smile was cold as the void between stars. Mercy? Like the mercy you showed Earth, like the mercy you showed the children of Sol? She gestured, and the chamber's displays activated, showing footage that made even hardened Imperial officers flinch. The final hours of Earth, as seen from orbital platforms, cities vaporized by quantum bombardment, evacuation ships destroyed while fleeing the system, children's faces pressed against viewports as their transports exploded in nuclear fire. This is what your empire calls order, Elena continued. This is the peace you brought to my homeworld. Grand Admiral Cray found his voice. The Soul Wars were a necessary action to murder 6 billion innocent civilians. Elena cut him off. To erase a culture, a history, a people's dreams and hopes and future. You didn't wage war. Admiral, you committed genocide. The holographic image of Elena stepped closer, and somehow the Imperial leaders felt as if she were actually present in the room with them. But you made one crucial mistake, she said softly. You didn't kill us all. The transmission shifted, showing tactical displays that made the Imperial leadership's blood run cold. Hundreds of quantum tunnel signatures appeared across the galaxy's edge. each one representing a human fleet emerging from hiding. The scale was staggering enough. Firepower to challenge the Empire itself. We spent a century in the dark between stars. Elena continued. We buried our dead, raised our children, and never forgot what you took from us. We learned. We adapted. We evolved. And now, the display showed human fleets moving with impossible coordination, striking imperial positions with surgical precision, planets surrendering without a fight as their orbital defenses simply shut down, entire sectors declaring independence as human ships appeared in their skies. Now we've come home. The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial High Command in stunned silence. Through the massive windows of their chamber, they could see the lights of Coruscant Prime stretching to the horizon. 12 trillion souls, depending on their leadership, their strength, their ability to protect the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. And for the first time in 5 centuries, they weren't sure they could. Part 5, the New Dawn Battle of Coruscant Prime, lasted 17 minutes. Elena stood on the observation deck of the Vengeance as it hung in high orbit above the Imperial capital, watching the planet's lights flicker like dying stars. Around her ship, the combined human fleets had assembled over 3,000 vessels representing a century of hidden construction, technological advancement, and unified purpose. Each ship bore the scars of exile but moved with the precision of a people who had never forgotten how to wage war. Final surrender confirmed from all orbital platforms, reported Admiral Sarah Mitchell via quantum link from her flagship New Horizons. Imperial High Command is requesting terms. Elena nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the world below. Coruscant Prime was beautiful, a jewel of crystal spires and floating cities that housed the Empire's elite. It was also built on the bones of 1,000 conquered civilizations, its wealth extracted from the suffering of entire species. Arya, she said softly to her ship's AI, show me the children. The holographic display materialized beside her, showing the refugee camps that had sprung up on every liberated world. Human children born in exile, seeing sunlight for the first time, families reunited after decades of separation, elderly survivors weeping as they set foot on worlds their grandparents had described in whispered stories. But Elena's attention was drawn to one particular image, a small girl with dark hair and curious eyes, standing in the ruins of what had once been Nexus 7's capital. She was perhaps 7 years old, the same age Elena's daughter had been when the bombs fell on Earth. Her name is Luna, Arya said gently, recognizing her mother's focus. Her parents were killed in the Imperial occupation. She's been asking the relief workers when the bad people will come back. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every decision that had brought them to this moment. The Empire was broken, its fleets scattered or surrendered, its leadership humbled. But victory had always been secondary to the deeper question: what came next? A chime indicated an incoming transmission. Elena straightened as the image of Emperor's voice Rex appeared before her, though his mechanical perfection now seemed somehow diminished. Captain Vasquez, he said, his synthetic voice carrying none of its former authority. The Empire is prepared to discuss terms. There are no terms. Elena replied simply, there is only justice. Rex's image flickered, whether from technical interference or uncertainty. She couldn't tell. What do you want? Elena gestured to the tactical display showing the galaxy's political structure. 12,000 star systems, each one marked by centuries of imperial control. Every world you conquered will be given the choice to remain part of your empire or declare independence. Every species you enslaved will be freed. Every injustice will be answered for. That would mean the end of everything we've built. Rex protested. Double quotes, yes. Elena said without hesitation, it would. She moved to another display, showing the reconstruction plans her people had developed during their century of exile. Not conquest, but restoration. Not domination, but cooperation. A galactic federation where species worked together instead of being ruled by fear. The Empire was built on a lie, she continued. The lie that strength comes from controlling others, that peace comes from suppression, that order requires suffering. You believed that lie so completely that you forgot a fundamental truth about intelligent life, which is, Elena smiled, And for the first time in decades, it wasn't cold or grim. We adapt, we survive, and we never, ever forget our children. The transmission ended, and Elena turned back to the observation windows below. The lights of Coruscant Prime continued their eternal dance, but something had changed. For the first time in 5 centuries, those lights represented not just power, but possibility. Marcus Chen joined her at the viewport, studying the planet below. Orders, Captain. Elena thought of Luna, standing in the ruins, but no longer afraid. She thought of the thousands of human children who would grow up free, who would never know the fear of hiding in the dark between stars. She thought of her daughter Maria, whose memory had driven her through the darkest moments of exile. Signal. All fleets, she said finally, begin Phase 2. It's time to help the galaxy remember what it means to hope. As the human ships began their descent toward the planet's surface, they carried more than weapons and warriors. They carried teachers and engineers, doctors and artists, philosophers and dreamers. They carried the seeds of a new civilization, one built not on the ashes of the old, but on the promise that even the longest night eventually gives way to dawn. The age of empire was ending. The age of the Federation had begun. And in the depths of space, where humanity had learned to survive in the darkness, new ships were already being born, vessels that would carry their children to distant stars, ensuring that never again would any species have to face extinction alone. The galaxy was vast, beautiful, and full of possibility. It was time to explore it not as conquerors, but as family. Asterisk.